Hello, listeners, and welcome to the third and final part in this mini-series on the children of God with Whisper and Jemima, co-hosts of the Butterflies and Bravery podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Butterflies and Bravery, you can follow the links in the episode description. And for early access to ad-free full-length episodes on the Cult Vault, you can visit patreon.com/the Cult Vault and support the show from only £1 a month. But for now, here is Whisper and Jemima. The upheaval that is a really familiar and almost integral part of the children of God, keeping people consistently separated, stopping them from forming bonds, keeping people moving around the world for security reasons as well, so the information control on where people are located and all of those things. It didn't stop you two from forming the bond that you have now. So I'm just wondering if you remember meeting one another and recognizing early on that you might be able to have the types of conversations that if you had with other people might land you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I don't specifically remember meeting Whisper because we were constantly shuffled around. And I know I went to the home up in northern Thailand where she was, because they were having a tiny little teen training thing starting. And so, but we just a few days in, we all went to the park and everybody was going to go off on this walk. And she had a hurt ankle and I wasn't feeling well. So we both decided to stay back. We're like, can we just sit here and look at the river and stuff? So they're like, okay, fine. They all went off and we just sat and talked for several hours. And then that was when we sort of we just bonded, and then that was it.
Yeah, we saw safety in each other, that's for sure. When we got and then they decided to bring all the teens that were from the up country home down to the main school. They were making the big school, bringing us all down. And like pretty much, like I think it was in 2 days of walking in the front door, Jemima and I immediately, you're not allowed to talk to each other immediately.
Yep. Okay, so the adults recognized that there was a friendship forming between the two of you.
Yeah, we spent a lot of years with being that our friendship was in secret.
Wow, it's wild to think as well, because we're talking about you as young adults here at this point, but there are adults going through the same situation where they're being monitored, and if they get too close to people, they're having other adults come to them and say, you two can't speak to each other. And it's really strange to think of that, because of course the adults should really be taking care of the children and dictating the children's behavior, but everybody's behavior was being dictated and regimented. And I think it's easy to forget about that sometimes. There's so many layers to all of the stuff that was happening. But I wonder if any of your parents were ever told, you can't have that friend. You are too friendly with that friend. And I think that's I just think about all of that stuff and find it quite interesting.
Couples were regularly broken up because they loved each other too much. That was a very regular thing.
Yeah.
There's one of the famous quotes in the cult came very early on. It was like one of the very earliest missives that Berg ever wrote, and he said, God's in the business of breaking up small units and families. God is in the business, and that's what they built it off of. They called it one wife. All of the children belong to all of the adults. All of each other belongs to each other. All of the women are your wives. All of the men are your husbands. Like that, there was no individuality. It's what he built the whole movement on, is that structure.
Do you remember a time? So you were told that you couldn't be friends. You maintained a friendship in secret. Do you remember and Jemima, you mentioned that you left when you were 27. Whisper, what age were you when you left the group?
It was in 2002, so I would have been 26, I think.
Right, so
Yeah, 20 or
that
it's
makes
27 too.
that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah, yeah.
perfect sense, doesn't it? So Jemima, you left the Children of God when you were 27. Whisper, you left when you were 26. You're about a year apart from one another. So you really managed to leave the group around about the same time. Did you
Very close,
both
yeah.
know that that was something that had happened, or did you reconnect once you were both on the outside in the system?
Haha. No, we knew. She knew that I left. I left a little bit before her, but that was just because she had 4 kids and she was married, and they were already headed to Jamaica when I left. I mean, I think it was only a matter of maybe 8 or 9 months before. I do
Mhm.
remember having a conversation with Whisper after I left, and being like, I left and telling her stuff. And I remember her being like, but what about the end time? Because we were so programmed that the world was going to end and all of these things were going to happen, that was like a prominent fear in our minds, was constantly, we're all going to die soon. And but it didn't take long, I think, for all of us to kind of start realizing it was a lot of it was once we got out of Southeast Asia, I think, is when we started kind of realizing, like, this isn't what I need to be doing. This isn't how
Mhm.
people are supposed to be treated. I mean, even though I didn't really know I was abused until I went to a therapist. Like, I was the person that was like, oh, I did this and I did that. And then they're like, hello, you were abused. Wait, what? Because I hadn't processed anything. Like, I just stuffed it all in the closet until I had a nervous
Mhm.
breakdown. But
But being born and raised into a group, you have nothing to recall on from the life
yeah,
before joining the group. So I think it's not a big. I don't think it's surprising to hear that you hadn't really put those things together until a therapist had the right words and tools for you to recognize that. Whisper, do you feel like that's similar to how you realized or began working through your experiences?
Um, I vaguely remember that conversation with Jemima, and I think at the time I was not sure what I believed, and I think I was like, "Do you know something I don't know?" That was a little bit of the question there, but because I could get in such big trouble for even communicating with her because she was now out.
yep.
So, so some of it was just making sure that you were saying the right things in case somebody else was listening. I think I can remember quite clearly when it broke for me because as I mentioned, I had 4 kids in 6 years, and um my body does not like to be pregnant whatsoever. I have extreme sickness that I have to be medicated for through my whole pregnancy. And I almost died. Well, I sort of did die in my first pregnancy. Um, and I had these little kids, and some new big like revolution came out about like, because we all had every single day you had requirements, right? You had requirements of how many hours you were supposed to pray, how many hours you're supposed to read the word, how many hours you were supposed to have go outside, all this stuff. And so they had made some big push that we needed to commit even more to Jesus, and they're going to up the number of hours of word time that you needed to have every single day. And you had to have that amount of hours every single day for the 7 days leading up to the one movie a week you were allowed. And if you didn't have all those hours, you couldn't go to the movie. And I remember just like reading this in the we call them GNs in the pamphlet. And I was like, there's this picture of Jesus standing there, and he was like, the word bubble to the woman was like, I gave my life for you. Can't you give something up for me? And I was like, I don't even have time to take a shower. And this God of love, this person who supposedly loves me, can't even let me have an hour and a half of movie a week when I can't even find time to take a shower. Like that's when it just like really broke for me. I was like, this can't possibly be love. It just can't. and and then I went on a bit of a rampage of like I found some plagiarized art, and I went sort of on a rampage about that, like, and it started uncovering like some of the depth of their lying, like really like just blatant lying. And that shocked me because I always thought, even the things that I questioned about the way that we grew up, I always felt like, well, at the most, these people are misguided. Like they really believe, like you know, like I had given that bandwidth, I guess, to them. But when I started uncovering these images that they found in, like, they were fantasy pictures that they had recreated like line for line, published them for the cult, and said that these were visions that came to them, and these are now the devil, you know, like these are, you know, these are this, these are that, and and like just like where I'm sitting there, like when I started putting those two together, I was like, this is a blatant lie. For example, so there's this one of the things that they wanted to put out was like how the first generation and the second generation needed to have more sex with each other because their second generation were too like uptight or selfish or whatever it was. And there was some group that they made up, I think, or I don't know, the Cathars. And there was this vision that they had gotten of a young woman in the Cathars, and she had her arms open and in supplication. And it wasn't until after the publication went out that somebody noted that there was 6 fingers on one of the hands. And then a prophecy came, and the prophecy said, I led you to draw that because that is how that woman in real life was. That's a real woman, and she came and she prophesied through you and spoke through you. When I found the image that they had traced for that, it was the 6th quote unquote finger was a claw that the artist had not like put together. It was a claw, not another finger. So I just was like, oh, this is super, super done. So unfortunately at the time my partner didn't have the same feelings as me at all. But after a couple years, I was able to we were finally able to get him to leave. So we the only reason you were allowed to keep money was if you were going to the mission field, and we were in the States at the time. So so we told them that we were going to the mission field, and technically we were, but we bought round trip tickets. And we flew to Jamaica and stayed there a few months and helped the home that was there, the people that were there, and then took the flight back, and that was the full like break from everything.
The sickness that you mentioned with pregnancy is a condition that I also suffer with. Is it hyperemesis gravidarum in the States as well? So
Yeah.
with both of my pregnancies, I was hospitalized on a drip. Well, with my second pregnancy as well, my son was 9 months old when we fell pregnant, and the sickness starts at 6 weeks and goes on till 40 weeks, as you know. And I remember speaking to Mary Mahoney about a woman that she lived with who had the same condition, who kept having children, and it was making me feel nauseous just listening to Mary talk about this woman repeatedly having pregnancies and being, because of course you can't always access the correct medical facilities that you might need, midwives, for example, hospitals and medication. So where I had like 4 different types of anti-sickness tablets and steroids and would go to the hospital to be rehydrated. Did you have access to any of those things, Whisper, during your pregnancies?
We were in a up country home in Thailand when I first got pregnant, and the only other women in the house were Thai women. So they would, for breakfast, they would have fishball soup, which
Oh
is
my
basically
goodness.
like fish dumplings. And my bedroom, well, it was a closet, but it was next to the kitchen. So like I never got away from any smells. And as I got sicker and sicker, I started carrying around, I carried around um a pitcher with me because because I was vomiting blood at that point. And so I started carrying a pitcher a pitcher around with me so that I could, so that I could have something, you know, to throw up. And I remember one time the leader came to me and he was like, the other members want to know why you can watch a movie in your condition, but you can't clean the bathroom twice. And I was like, I was like, I didn't even know what to say at that point. I was like, well, because one is sitting down. And anyways, um, I lost so much weight that I started blacking out. And finally I couldn't stand anymore. And we said we want to go to we need to go to the hospital. And they said, well, if you do, you're going to be out of God's will and we won't have anything to do with you. So I couldn't walk. So we went to the hospital. They dropped us off at the front door and left. Um, and so yeah, that night I had a near death experience. I remember very clearly that whole what happened. And I came back to, and the next morning I was covered in bruises and everything like that. But uh, a few days later, I got a letter from Jemima, and it was dated. It was dated the night that I had to been revived. And she said, "Oh, you came to me in a dream last night. You stood at the foot of my bed, and you said you're going to get news um, that I got real sick, but we're going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And I was like looking at the date. I was like, holy hell. Like, did I just like walk? Did I just like spirit walked into Jemima's dream? So it was a super, it was a very traumatic experience. But it is what, at that point, my grandparents heard what happened. And so they sent money for us to fly back to this fly, not back, but fly to the States so that I could have some care. But yeah, it was, there's no such thing as easy pregnancies for me.
It's like a rejection, isn't it? It's like your body is it just doesn't want the hormone. The your body's like no. Um,
Yeah.
what was labor like for you? Because thankfully I had two pretty much textbook labors that everybody said you deserve that for having such difficult pregnancy, and I was like, yeah, well, thanks. That really makes up for 9 months of of just the worst.
My first son was a fairly regular, like for first time. I think I had 20 hours or something like that of delivery. And it was fairly okay, except that um they insisted on having people in the delivery room that I didn't want to have there, but that was kind of par for the course. Um, my second, my my second was a very unique situation because we were supposed to be with we were supposed to be with this one home, and she was pregnant one of the women was pregnant too, and so we were supposed to go together to Seattle, and we were going to meet them up in Seattle. So when we got up to Seattle, they were like, "Oh, by the way, we're taking off. They're going back to their country so that they could have the baby there." They decided, and left us there in Seattle, and I had no idea what to do, and they didn't want the government involved in anything. So they found this midwife that that did home births, and so we lived on the top. It was a 4-story place. We lived on the top of it, just one little bedroom and one bathroom, and I had 2 weeks of like false labor, and the midwife would show up, and I would be like the same 2 centimeters, whatever, and and she was like an hour away. So one time when it really started, I said, "Now's the time," and she was like, "Well, if like when they get closer together, like call me."
Oh,
and
gosh.
and in the space of 20 minutes. So I only like labored with my second for 20 minutes. And I was like, I need to push. And at this point she was like, she wanted me to be, I was in the bathtub to, like relax and help make the delivery earlier. I was like, so they called me the midwife. She's on her way here. They handed the phone, they handed the phone to my husband at the time, and he was like, and she's like, "You're going to deliver this baby. Call 911." But by the time they got there, the baby was already born. He was screaming his head off, but they wouldn't let me hold him because there was nobody there to check his airways, which I didn't know at the time. I just, but the door to the bathroom was so small, and I was sitting on the floor or on a stool, and the door opened inward. So when the paramedics came, they had to take the door off the hinges and carry me to my bed, wet and naked. So that was memorable.
Very different from the first. Yeah, I see what you mean by that now. Oh my goodness, Whisper. That's like something that you'd watch in like a fictional TV show. That is a wild story. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it's like a like a comedy of events for sure.
And that letter that you sent, Jemima, to Whisper, do you know that's the only actual piece of perhaps divine intervention that I've heard across any conversation that I've had regarding the children of God. Like that there could be any kind of higher being acting out there in some way. That is absolutely incredible that you had that experience and you wrote that letter to Whisper, and I just think that feels like that has some otherworldly kind of feeling to it. None of this made up Moses stuff that you were being taught as children. Wow, that's absolutely incredible.
Well, our love, because
they didn't believe me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had sent out prayer requests, so we prayed, when everybody was sick. But the prayer requests would come out a little bit after. Sometimes things would happen, like she'd already been sick for a month, and then we'd get the prayer request. So everybody was desperately praying because they knew she was like dying in the hospital. And then I woke up the next day and I'm like, "Guys, she's fine. She came and told me she's fine. So everything's okay." And they were like, yeah, okay, we still need to pray." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm telling you, she's fine. She came and told me, and I know." And they're like, "Okay, thank you. That's really nice. Yeah, no, we're still going to pray."
Oh,
I was 100% convinced that she was fine because it was so real to me that she had come and said, "It's okay. I'm going to be okay."
But we've throughout our life, we've constantly done there's constantly been little things that we've done at the same time when we were apart.
Yeah, we still do.
It's like we're twins that were like somehow we're not in the same womb.
I was looking at your website last week and actually yesterday as well. I am working with a few other writers around a collaborative blog, and we were looking at your website because my friend very much likes butterfly iconography and very beautiful sort of ethereal colorful stuff, and I was like, hey Venny, you should check out this website. She was like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely beautiful. I was like, I knew you'd like it. So I can see there's a similar picture to that, Jemima, to the sort of art of your website in the background of your frame. And it says on your website that there's like cursing and swearing involved in your podcast, Butterflies and Bravery podcast, and that it's a not suitable for work podcast. And I think that is you kind of laugh about the content, and the warning of swearing, but there is a trigger warning as well for the sensitive themes that you both discuss, not just not just for both of your stories, but also for the guests that you have on your show as well, who may have experienced similar things, whether it was in the same group or something completely different. And something that I was thinking about when I was looking at your website and I saw that warning for not suitable for work, I wondered, how do you both protect yourselves when you have these conversations with individuals on your show? Because I'm not somebody that's had a personal experience in a cultic environment, and I have to do work after these conversations to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. How do you two do that together when you're discussing things that may be re-traumatizing for the both of you?
Usually we talk to each other, to be honest. I
Mhm.
mean, that's whenever I'm sad or whatever, anything is like, I just can't take it. My first thing is talk to Whisper. And, that's kind of our go-to thing, is just to go to each other, I think. But I struggle a lot with self-care, actually, because we had an interview this morning and I was kind of a little bit re-triggered and re-traumatized. And then I'm sitting there like just tapping on the table for like 5 minutes, and I'm trying to figure out how am I supposed to take care of myself. And I was so blank and so just like, I don't know how to take care of myself, so I don't usually do very well at that. I just carry on with whatever I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. I'm terrible at self-care. I only take care of myself when I'm like, okay, I'm dying, I'm about to die, now I have to take care of myself.
Yeah.
What do you do,
So,
Whisper?
similar. Um, well, one of the things that I try to do before going into any interview with someone, whether it's someone from our own cultic background or some other cult, is like my goal for my life is to be the person that I needed when I didn't have anybody. So I always try to kind of like think about that when I'm going in, of like, okay, like this is about, this isn't necessarily going to be easy or whatever it might be, but like we're doing something with this podcast. Like people are telling their stories in their own power, which is the biggest one to me, because we've had our stories taken and sensationalized and cut up and edited as so, but this is 100% like, no, you get to tell it any way that you want to. And so there's that, like, to me it's beautiful. Like there's a certain, just a certain beauty in being able to just like kind of like talk about something like this with other second generation. But yes, I definitely do. I'll have, because I'm bad at self-care as well, and unfortunately I can be quite stoic and I'll go and go, and then when I sort of hit a bump, it's like a pretty big bump, and I have it's kind of bad.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just a matter of like, like going to the beach or watching. Sometimes it's just watching a TV show that tends to get me completely like out of my head.
Nature
So,
walks are probably the best. For me, I live in the mountains. She lives by the ocean. So I think for both of us, nature, anything involving going to some beautiful nature has been some of the most healing things that I've done.
The podcast itself, I think you've kind of alluded there, Whisper, to some of the reasons why the show might have started in the first place, in terms of giving yourselves a platform to tell your stories, how they actually happened, but also to offer that to other people who have had their voices either either taken at birth or stolen later in life.
Mhm.
So how did you two come up with the idea for the show? How did you come up with the name? What guests have you had on, and what type of content can listeners expect to find if they head over to the Butterflies and Bravery podcast today?
Take it away, Whisper. It was all Whisper's idea. I'm just along for the ride. She came up with the whole idea, and then the concept and all of that was, a little bit of teamwork, but it was really her. So I'll let her talk about it.
When I started the podcast, when we started the podcast, at the time, like my thinking was that it would be a platform for people to tell their stories, but any survivor of anything, like a survivor, because I work with the I work with an anti-trafficking organization here in the States, and like I've met survivors that are just just amazing, and like people need to know that the being a survivor is actually a positive rather than a negative. Like, if I had a company, if I had a company, like I would hire survivors because they've had that peace in their life, and so I wanted to kind of portray that, and that's hence the image is the half warrior, the half butterfly, the softness and the hardness. That's actually my daughter, by the way, in the
Oh,
picture.
is it? Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. That's lovely.
Yeah. But in our own sort of circle of network, a lot of who we know are our own, like our own ex cult network. So a lot of the early episodes were, like there was about half and half, I think, in the beginning. Like our cult, couple other cults, we had a few amazing interviews, like with Heather Platt, that was about more the heat, finding healing and holding space and beautiful concepts like that. But over the course of this last year and a half, one thing for sure that we started seeing is that there's more and more SGAs coming up that want to tell their story, that want to get heard, and so that shifted like our second season to I think the tagline is as living, loving, and leaving after a cult, something like that. I got those wrong, mixed up. um, and I think that there is this, it's almost like a movement that's starting to happen, because the kids that were our age, the we're like the first second generation that anybody's ever dealt with. Their therapists don't know what to do about us. Like the studies that have been done have all been on people that joined. Nobody's done any studies on like what that means when you're born into this life. And so it's a bit of an anomaly. I do this all the time on the podcast too. I'm a little and so it's almost like it's growing as it's going, has been more what it is. And I think finding belonging has probably at the end of the day been the center of it all, of as we like to say, being around people you don't have to translate yourself for. And yeah, I mean we've met a lot of other ex cult kids born in cults that not the same cult as us, but like are having similar experiences, are like, and so that's been really wonderful. And we've also been working a bit with Dr. Yanya Lalich and the Lalich Center, and because she's been amazing, and after we had she did one group called Born in a Cult, and I just remember she said afterwards, she was like, I thought I knew, like I thought I expected how different it was going to be, because she spent 30 years with ex-cult members, but the second generation is like a whole new ball of wax kind of thing. And so uh I think the more of us that can find each other, the better that is, like we won't feel that isolation.
There's always interesting parts layered within people's traumatizing experiences that I think makes for a whole experience when you hear someone's story, because you're then correlating some of the some of the interesting links to other groups. So as you've said, the second generation adults that you're speaking with, they might not have been part of the same group, but I'm sure that there is so much that you can all discuss and recognize in each other's experiences, and that must be incredibly validating for some of the guests that you have on the show, for you both to be able to offer that to the people that come and chat with you. And what I absolutely love about Yanya and her work is that she is, as you've said, there's so much research on first generation adults in joining cultic groups, but there really isn't as much, or in comparison, there really isn't anything for second generation adults. And this is a very, very exciting time to be involved in cult education, cult awareness, and cult recovery, because we're starting to see the waves of change. So where you have sort of Margaret Singer and Robert J. Lifton's work as some of the original stuff that would focus on first generation adults, that's been built on by incredibly intellectual and successful cult experts like Stephen Hassan, Yanya Lalich, Rick Allen Ross, Alexandra Stain. And now you have all of that as a basis to then apply to second generation adults, adapt it, change it, grow it, so that we can continue to get a fuller picture. And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because we're in this really, really exciting time where things can change, where people are coming forward to tell their stories. There are so many different platforms now where people can tell their stories through different mediums. And the fact that Yanya can have decades of experience in the field, but then go back to her bounded choice model and completely change it in recognition of second generation adults, in understanding that one model that might help and support first generation adults is not necessarily going to be a model that can help second, third, fourth generation adults in the same way. And we'll change that bounded choice model to recognize that. And I don't know that everybody is thinking in that way. So it's all just very exciting. And I think that things like the Butterflies and Bravery podcast, it's one of those things that's kind of, it's the sparks before the fire. And I feel like if people were to head over to the podcast, which I'll leave a link to in the episode description, and the beautiful website that people, butterfliesandbravery.com, that people have to go and check out, I think that you really get a sense of it's almost like a little, it is that almost boundary breaking, rule breaking, kind of almost like anarchy, second generation adults coming together to kind of rebel in the ways that they weren't able to when they were younger. And I just think it's absolutely incredible. I listened to a couple of the episodes. I was laughing when I was listening to your interview with Lisa Kendall, because her cat was getting into the cupboards behind her, and I just thought it was so funny, just listening to Lisa's life kind of unfolding around her as you were having that conversation. So it's a very humanizing podcast. It's very sensitive. It does have the funny and uplifting moments, and as you've mentioned, you give people the chance to tell their story how they want to tell it. So if that includes like swearing and cursing, then that's fine. And it comes with the added benefit of you both being able to offer your experiences in comparison to the guest's experiences as well, which sometimes echoes what the guest says, but also sometimes adds another perspective or layer that listeners might not have considered until you've both offered up that information. So it's I'm sure you would be upset with your guests if they told you that they don't practice self-care after you speak with them. So you both need to make sure that you're doing as much of that as you can. um and yeah, just I'm sure that your guests will tell you just how important the work is that you're doing, and how incredible it must be for them to have access to the both of you, and a platform like Butterflies and Bravery. So thank you both so much for all of the work that you do. Jemima, would you like to tell everybody where they can find your show, and what your release schedule looks like, and all of that really, really good promotional stuff?
Me? Oh my. Okay. Yeah. Whisper's the website queen. Whisper, you do it. She does all the website stuff. I do all the audio stuff.
Yes, we. Oh, so go ahead, Jemima. You know it.
No, you do it. It's our website is www.butterfliesandbravery.com. No spaces, just Butterflies and Bravery. And you can find our podcast on all streaming services. Just say, Alexa, play Butterflies and Bravery. I tried it. It works. It's so crazy. Have you ever done that, Casey? Have you ever been like, Alexa, play
I
Cult?
haven't.
Oh, you should. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny because she'll be like, oh, here's the latest episode of Cult Vault. And all of a sudden your voice is coming out and you're like, ah.
Oh, that's
funny.
I don't know that.
funny.
I feel like that's a bit spooky, isn't it? Isn't that a bit spooky?
It is a bit spooky, but sometimes I like to go back and listen because I'm like, okay. So, like you were saying earlier, when you listen to a podcast like that, you kind of feel like you understand the person and you know them. You feel a bit of a sense of camaraderie. I got to go back and be like, okay, what are people thinking and feeling about me? Because I don't remember what I said.
Someone emailed me the other day with a link to my Internet Movie Database page, which I thought was a bit wild. So I was like, oh, did you know the Cult Vault's on IMDb? And I was like, oh my goodness, that's the website that I use when I'm like, I know this I've seen this person in another film before. And then somebody
so
sending me
funny.
a link to my own page. I just thought that was really, really strange. Next, it will be a Wikipedia page, and then we've really made it. And then we're really running things. So that's wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time today, for sitting down and talking with me, for offering up your experiences to the listeners, even though I understand that it can never be easy to talk about. It must always be just as difficult each time you talk through it, whether it's on your own show or somebody else's. But as you said, Whisper, here comes the revolution, and the way to do that is through the strength and the bravery of people coming forward to share their stories. So thank you both so much for the work that you do, for your time here today. And I appreciate both of you so much.
Thank you so much. That means so much. It was really nice. It was really
Yes.
lovely meeting you.
We appreciate you too.
Yeah, so much. You're definitely a wonderful interviewer.
Yes, and
I
it's really
appreciate that.
nice
Thank
to
you.
have people like you that want, I mean, I don't know if this is your mission, but I feel like it is to educate the public on these things so people can actually see and understand what it means, what a cult is, what happens, what the daily experiences are like. And I think that's super important too, because so many people are just like, whatever, whatever, you grew up in a cult, couldn't have been that bad, or it's just completely unrelatable. And so I think it's very important for for, to have people that haven't been in cults to also try and educate people, because you have a whole different perspective on it than we do.
Yeah.
So, it's just more pieces of the puzzle to, we're all doing our best and
Yeah, well,
trying
we're all sitting here as sister mates today. We are all sister mates.
That's right.
And
Yay!
one of the most beautiful things about the podcast is every interview that I have the privilege of conducting is an education for me, and then I just happen to be able to offer that to other people. So it's kind of like a dual learning experience. I'm learning things that I didn't know all the time, and I think that is, not many people can say that. I don't think. I feel incredibly lucky to be in the position that I'm in, and to spend my days talking with people like yourselves. So thank you both so much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on the Children of God, with Whisper and Jemima, co-hosts of the Butterflies and Bravery podcast. To learn more about Butterflies and Bravery, you can follow the links in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.